Hey there everyone, Graham from LoadingReadyRun here, and I'm going to show you how to put together a sealed deck at your pre-release for Magic the Gathering Foundations. I'm joined by Serge, who's going to be here helping me out with some of the mechanics if necessary, talk about some changes that are happening with Foundations. Now, at your pre-release, you won't have a personal judge, but there are judges there, and they're there to help.
Please call judges. Real simple, hand in the air, call judge, hold it until somebody says hi.
Now, maybe you've never done a pre-release before because you've never played Magic before. Pre-release is a fine way to get into it. Perhaps, though, you've been playing Magic for years and just never gone to a pre-release. That's totally fine. So let me show you what it's like to open up this, a pre-release kit, in this case of Magic Foundations.
Let's see it.
Ooh. So as they've been doing lately, the cardboard outer frame has some counters you can punch out if you so desire, +1/+1 counters, stun counters, things that might be useful to you. And then inside that, you have this box, which contains a spin down counter you can use for tracking your life, 6 boosters of the set, in this case, Magic Foundations, and a promo card.
Very important to note, your promo card can go in your deck. Feel free to play it.
In this case, my promo is
What you get?
Krenko, Mob Boss. 3/3 for 4, tap to create X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens where X is the number of goblins you control.
One of the all-time best finishers in the goblin deck.
Very, very good stuff. The pre-release kit also comes with a code to enter onto Magic Arena to get 6 packs of Foundations on Arena. So at the pre-release, you're building a sealed deck, which is a limited deck, sealed in draft or limited formats. You're building a 40-card deck out of these 6 booster packs. So the next step is to open it up and see what you have inside. Now, how do you like to do this, Serge? I tend to just immediately sort everything by color.
Yeah, I do one extra layer on top of that. I put my rare at the top and then colors afterwards, because I like to use the rares as sort of a signpost of what I think I'm going to be building around, because they're typically the strongest cards in your pool.
Classic Sarah Angel here.
Ooh, welcome back.
Zombify. All right,
Our first rare.
Yeah, we have Authority of the Consuls. It's an enchantment. Creatures your opponents control enter tapped. Whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, you gain 1 life.
Hateful.
Interesting. If you are an existing player, a change that you'll notice in Foundations is that enchantments now have the sort of sparkly Nyx frame from Theros, not just for enchantment creatures anymore.
So fancy.
I have a foil Macabre Waltz, a Windscarred Crag for some mana fixing, an art card, and I'll put Krenko up there with the red. All right, pack number 2. So I'm not even, for me, I don't even think about sort of what direction I'm going until I'm at least partway through opening my packs.
I start counting the rares, and I hope at this point I get nothing but red and white rares. Don't show me any other colors anywhere else. I want as many cards in 1 or 2 colors as possible.
All right, fair enough. Well, hey, look at this. Works well with Krenko. It's another goblin.
Ooh.
The Sear Slicer Goblin. 1 and a red for a 2/1 with Raid. At the beginning of your end step, if you attacked this turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. Raid is one of the mechanics returning in this format. How does Raid work?
Great question, Graham. Raid is actually an ability word, not a mechanic. Ability words are flavorful sort of groupings of lots of cards that do the same thing. In this case, Raid just checks if you've attacked with a creature that turn.
So any card that says Raid is going to do something after combat if you attack.
Correct.
Great. And in this case, it just makes more goblins, which is great for my existing goblins. I got a rare and a mythic in this one. I also have Rite of the Dragon Caller. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you make a 5/5 dragon token.
Pardon?
Okay.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
That's very cool. I mean, not a goblin, but...
No. I'll take it. We seem to be getting a majority of red and white, which is
that's
handy.
another goblin. That's a gremlin, pardon me.
Oh, here we go. And this is an uncommon, but it's Goblin Negotiation.
Goblin.
X red. It deals X damage to a creature, and then you make a number of 1/1 goblins equal to the amount of excess damage.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you put 4 damage at a 3/3, you kill the 3/3 and you get a goblin out.
Yeah.
Okay, pretty
Very
cool.
Very flexible.
Now this rare is blue.
I'm sorry.
Lunar Insight. 2 and a blue sorcery. Draw a card for each different mana among non-land permanents you control. And a foil and a Swiftwater Cliffs and a human token, which is not the kind of token I need. I clearly need goblin tokens. Pack number 4. I've got an adorable cat in the Helpful Hunter. Goblin Surprise.
Yeah, you had another goblin we didn't talk about too. Like your goblin pool is getting stacked, and this is what I like to see at this point. Like the earlier you can identify a clear theme that's coming with your deck, the easier it is to start to build it, right?
Wow, Genesis Wave. This is a card that was relevant way back around when I started playing. X green, green, green. Reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield into your graveyard. Cool.
See, now I want to be greedy and not play red-white, but I still think red-white is correct. Maybe it's red-green, who knows?
Yeah, I don't think I can fit triple green into my
Yeah, you got 2 packs.
red-white deck.
Don't say no yet, don't say no.
That's true. You know, I'm picking up a lot of good removal in black as well. Oh, interesting. Bolt Wave is a red mana for a sorcery that deals 3 damage to each opponent. Now, at your pre-release, that's 1 opponent.
Yeah, you only have 1 opponent in one-on-one. But this is one of these cool flexible cards that could also be used in multiplayer variants like Commander.
Hey, what if my pre-release is running 2-headed giant?
Aha! So in the event of 2-headed giant, this does work. Even though you have 1 life total that you're fighting against, you technically have 2 opponents.
Fun. Oh, another white rare. The Exemplar of Light. 2 white for a 3/3 angel with flying. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, which already works with my Authority of the Consuls.
Oh!
And whenever you put 1 or more counters on this creature, draw a card. But that only happens once each turn. That seems very, very, very cool.
Wow, that's strong.
That's very strong.
What's the mana cost?
4?
For a
3/3 flyer? That's great. Okay, cool.
Huh.
Hey, here's something else I just noticed, because this is new in Foundations as well. Whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on this creature, that's a change for Foundations.
It is. That is a change that's going to be on all cards going forward. In a lot of cases, instead of saying the full name, it's just going to say this card. That's going to help with the amount of words on a card, and also in some cases just makes it more clear what's happening.
I do appreciate that. I'm a fan. All right, last card. The piles are looking pretty even, though. I do have a lot of red. I have a lot of green as well, but I mean, that Exemplar of Light seems like something I've got to try and play.
So you're looking like the actual physical stack size of each one, right?
So I mean, I do that. I will sort of see, like, if I have way more just cards in general in certain piles, then maybe I don't need to worry about, in this case, blue as much.
Yeah, you haven't gotten a single black rare. We do have a blue rare somewhere in there, but it wasn't that exciting, so we buried it.
I forgot to actually set that
like
aside.
you didn't even set it aside because you're like, if it's not a bomb, you can't. It's kind of forgettable, right?
My bad. Yeah. All right, last pack here. Got an Evolving Wilds. That's
exciting.
Nice. And a Secluded Courtyard, lots of different lands. Wow, Vampire Nighthawk.
Vampire Nighthawk is back, wow.
Whoa, what the, look at this. I got 2 Ashroot Animists. Well, maybe red-green. Yeah, so it's 2 red-green for a 4/4 with Trample. Okay, I love a 4/4. When this creature attacks, another target creature you control gains Trample and +X until end of turn, where X is this creature's power. And I got a normal one of those and a fancy borderless one of those in the same pack.
Cool.
That's pretty amazing. And a full art swamp. Okay, so now my next step tends to be going through these piles of commons and uncommons and seeing which are cards that really make me excited to play that color, right? Because obviously the rares are important, but the bulk of your deck is commons and uncommons.
Yep.
And some of the commons and uncommons just aren't going to be doing as much for you as others. And so I like to go through all the colors more granularly next. Now, you will have different amounts of time to do the deck building depending on your store or wherever you're playing, but don't let the time pressure get to you. Take your time, look through your cards. They tend to be fairly generous with times
for pre-releases especially,
pre-releases, yeah.
May I make a suggestion as well?
Yeah.
Now I'd like to make 3 piles. One that is your bombs. Now not just your rares, but like some commons and uncommons are so powerful, they'll go in every deck. So Pacifism in white would be an example. I don't know if it's in the set.
Actually, I've got a Banishing Light here.
So, yeah.
And I consider Banishing Light, frankly, on par with these rares in terms of these are things that I definitely, these make me want to play white.
For sure. The second category, I would say, are good cards, but are synergy cards. So for example, you might not have a ton of life gain in your deck. So if you have an Ajani's Pridemate, for example, in a life gain deck, that's really strong, but it's just a 2/2 for 2 otherwise. So it goes into the second pile. And the third pile is bad cards, which unfortunately there are bad cards, cards that just don't fit, cards that are too expensive. And so you can sort of see where the strength of your deck lies. You're like, oh, this is all killer, or these are cards that we find if I'm splashing, or no, it turns out a lot of my white cards aren't strong enough to support a deck by themselves.
And I don't have an Ajani's Pridemate, but I do have Sarah Angel, which is very, very cool. And it's tempting to put that up with these ones. But
I would.
Yeah.
I think it's that. If you're in white, you're always going to play Sarah Angel, right?
Yeah, that's true. I have another Angel, a Vanguard Seraph. It's a 3/3 flyer for 4. Whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, surveil one. That's pretty cool.
I think that goes in that pile exactly. Yeah.
Because you need to be gaining life for it. Healer's Hawk is a 1/1 with lifelink, and it synergizes with that. But by itself, I don't think it's... I think the Healer's Hawk, you want to have other payoffs for gaining life. And we have that on our rare, but maybe Healer's Hawk just by itself, if you draw it, is a 1/1 for 1 with lifelink. What you want to be doing on turn 1? Maybe. I don't know yet.
You're like, have you convinced yourself?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. So here's one. I've got Fleeting Flight. It's an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains flying until end of turn. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to it this turn.
Wow. It's a very strong combat trick.
Very strong combat trick. But just having a combat trick is not going to help me win the game. So if I end up in white, I will probably run this. But is this card pulling me towards playing white? Not really. Similarly with Make Your Move, I will run that if I'm in white, but it's not sort of make or break at this point. Prideful Parent is 2 creatures for 1 card. That tends to be good. Dauntless Veteran makes all my other creatures stronger when it attacks. That's pretty cool too. That's just a little guy that draws a card. And this is a 3/4 that can potentially draw another card. So it's not, maybe the most exciting. And now to avoid having you watch me do this for each color, we're gonna just sort of jump ahead. And we've done that now. So here's sort of a rough breakdown. We'll get a little bit more granular with some of the stuff as we go forward, but right away I can tell you that the blue in this pool is not exciting, and so I'm just gonna move it to the side. And that is helpful to just sort of like relieve one level of mental pressure of like, okay, I don't have to worry about this color. Nothing against blue. I will play whatever color is good in my sealed deck. You are allowed to have color preferences, but in this case, we're not playing blue. Black has a bunch of cards that seem pretty good, like cards that you would play if you're playing black, cards that seem fine, and a bunch of good removal. That's sort of the main thing that we have with black. We've got Stab, Eaten Alive, Hero's Downfall, Bake into a Pie, and then we also have a Vampire Nighthawk, which is just a very good creature. But this is sort of all that black is really offering, and the removal is good. Sealed tends to be what's called a slower format, so the games necessarily aren't quite as quick to end. People are working towards casting their big scary creatures, and having removal like that is a good idea, but unfortunately I don't think there's enough being offered by the rest of the cards that I really want to play that. It has my shortest pile of cards that really make me want to play this color.
Now, look at these stacks.
Yeah.
Like actual stacks.
Yeah, so I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to lay out my deck as a mana curve, and I'll explain more of that in a second, for red-green, and take a look at that, even though white has some very cool cards and that angel seems really powerful.
Typically you want 23 playable cards. So when you're evaluating what cards you want to play, if you're going to be a 2-color deck or a 3-color deck, it's important to make sure you have that many playables. And it can be very tempting to pick a color if it has a very strong bomb, but if you're going to be short on the number of cards you need to make a deck, you probably need to go for the bigger pile, even if it's not quite as exciting.
That's an excellent point. Now, if I'm playing red-green, I'm definitely playing both of these Ashroot Animists. So those are going to sit there. That's their 4-mana creatures. I've got a Braid, which is some excellent removal. I tend to put creatures up here, spells down here, because then you can see at a moment's glance what your sort of breakdown of creatures to non-creatures is. Most of the time, and all these rules are flexible, but most of the time you're going to want to have more creatures than non-creatures. Goblin Negotiation has an X cost. I don't know exactly how much I'm going to pay for it. Let's say I'll pay 5 most of the time. Land War Elves, which taps for mana, which can help me cast the more expensive stuff sooner. Now, I'm noting that I have a lot of 4 mana creatures, which is maybe not something I'm necessarily keen to have.
Thrilled about, yeah.
Yeah. So let's see what the rest of our piles look like. 3 mana there, 2 mana there. Now I say 2 mana, but these gnarlid colonies have kicker. So how does kicker work?
Ooh, great question. Kicker is a mechanic that allows you to pay an additional cost for an alternate or additional effect. Typically, it's phrased as the main spell for a cost, and then for an additional cost, and then follow what the card says. So if you pay the kicker cost, you might get another creature or additional damage or an additional effect.
All right. Now, the gnarlid colonies, I've just noticed, have another line of text because kicker makes them enter with +1/+1 counters, but also they say each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter has trample. And these treetop snare spinners have an ability to put +1/+1 counters on my other creatures.
Ooh.
And this apothecary stomper also can put counters on creatures. So potentially I have a +1/+1 synergy as well. So, you know, reading all of your cards. Brazen Scourge.
I'm also really happy to see your 2 and 3s getting filled out here.
Yeah, me too. What you want to have ideally is a fairly sort of even split. I mentioned earlier that I was a little worried that I was getting a lot of 4-drops. And I mean, even this might be too many. Maybe I don't want both of these treetop snare spinners. But as long as you have, not necessarily more even, but a curve that tapers, you know, that you have some 1-drops and some 2s and some 3s and some 4s, that you don't just have all 1s and all 4s, so that you have spells to cast on a variety of turns. That's going to be the sort of thing that you're looking for. I am actually going to replace one of those 4s with this 4, which is an Elvish Regrower, that says when this enters, return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. Ooh. For me, in Sealed, I like to have some way to bring stuff back from the graveyard, because things are going to go to the graveyard.
Yep.
So here's sort of an attempt at a red-green deck, and I'm going to do a quick count of the cards. I have 24 cards here, and as Serge mentioned, you typically want to run 23 spells and 17 land, so I would look to make 1 cut out of this. Probably one of these more expensive non-creature spells.
Yeah, which sucks, I know.
Yeah. And it might just be Genesis Wave.
I know.
Because it casts for green, 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 so it's the hardest thing to cast.
Yeah.
And if you're already on a higher turn where you're spending that much mana, wouldn't it be better to just have cast some creatures by then? Honestly, this looks like a pretty sweet 23 cards for a sealed deck, but I do kind of want to look at what white could bring.
One thing to look at too, while you're building around your colors, don't forget that you also have colorless spells. You may have opened some artifacts, and those can flesh out your deck without making you splash for a 3rd color.
Oh, right. Over here, you're right, I do have these. So, Burnished Heart.
Ooh! It's a 3-drop, and it's a creature, score.
And it helps me get more lands out more quickly. I've got the Goldvein Pick, which is an equipment that gives a creature +1/+1, and whenever that creature deals damage to a player, I make a treasure token, which can tap for any color of mana, and also accelerates into these more expensive spells. So that is a potential thing to consider as well.
I like the pick. I like the pick.
And then in terms of my mana, I've got these 3 2-color lands, none of which are these 2 colors, and I'm not looking to add any cards outside of these colors to this deck, which you could. If you have a very powerful card that shares 1 color with the deck that you're building and has maybe just 1 pip of another color, and you open some of these lands, you could absolutely throw it in there. You could splash for it, as it's called, to potentially try and throw a more powerful spell into there as well. But I think this deck is powerful enough on its own. I do have an Evolving Wilds, though, which might be worth running just to make sure, because my Brazen Scourge here needs red-red, the Regrower needs green-green, that's red-red, that's red-green, and this might help on the early turns sorting out exactly the colors that I'm looking for.
I think if you are a 2-color deck, you should always be running Evolving Wilds. You do need to make another cut. You did add the pick. So I
added the pick and the heart, so now I'm
two cuts. Oh, pardon me. All right.
So if I'm looking to add those specifically, then yeah, we'd be looking to make 2 more cuts. But first I want to take a look at the white again.
Oh.
So as a thought experiment, if I was going to go with red-white like we thought I might do initially, I'd be losing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 green cards. Do I have 11 white cards that are going to be better for the deck overall than the green cards? Now I do have 1 Windscarred Crag, and so would it be worth running this and the Evolving Wilds, and then maybe I'm in red-white, but I'm still splashing for these Ashroot Animists. That seems like maybe it's a little bit optimistic. The Sarah Angel would absolutely get in. Banishing Light, as we mentioned, is terrific removal. Exemplar of Light just seems like an absolutely preposterous card that I would be tempted to try and fit into almost any deck, except, again, 2 white pips make it harder to cast here. Authority of the Consuls is annoying for my opponent, but I don't know that it's necessarily more powerful than these green cards. And then, yeah, I have all those creatures that we talked about earlier, but I actually don't think that overall I even have enough white cards total in this pool to make it better than this deck. And so, even though I think Exemplar Light might just be the best rare I opened, the actual pool doesn't help it. And so I think that really we're going to be setting white aside and we're going to be looking at red-green.
There is always a conversation to be had for how many colors to play in your pool. And ultimately it comes down to 2 things. 1, how much fixing do you have access to? And 2, how confident do you feel to pull it off and like what the games look like? And there's a lot of math you could do. My best advice is if at any point you're worried about your pool or worried about how it's going to come together, try and keep it as simple as possible. Because the simpler your deck's mana requirements, the more likely it is that you get to play a game of Magic, that you won't get screwed on mana or missing a color or whatever. It's definitely possible to do a 3, 4, or even 5 color deck in Limited, but it's not necessarily the best way to win a game, especially at your first pre-release.
With these dual lands being in so many of the packs, I think it's very likely that you could end up in 3 colors, especially if you have some very powerful cards across 3 colors that you happen to also have the lands for. But I think generally, yeah, you're going to be looking at probably just the 2 colors, and that's fine. I think I definitely want to run the Heart, and I wonder if I maybe just swap it for a different 3-mana creature, because the Brazen Scourge is a little more difficult to cast with its 2 red pips, and it's a 3/3 with haste, which is a fine creature, but maybe is not as exciting. And I think I want to have the Heart to make sure that I get the lands I need to be able to cast my more powerful, more expensive spells. So I'll pull that to the side. And then finally,
Overrun?
I actually don't think it's the Overrun.
Really?
So Rite of the Dragon Caller is unquestionably powerful, right? Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you make a dragon. However, it is a 6-mana enchantment that doesn't do anything by itself. You need to cast it for 6 mana, and then you need to cast an instant or sorcery, of which I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I do have 7 of those, but I need to cast this and then one of those, and then I get a dragon. So I'm trying to figure out, is it worth running this?
I mean, you're absolutely right, but it is cool.
It is cool, which sounds like we're joking, but hey, it's pre-release. Like
Yeah.
you should have fun with it. So you know what? You're right. I'm keeping that in there. I don't know what I'm going to cut yet, but I'm keeping that. I should probably cut a non-creature spell because I don't want to cut down on the number of creatures I have. I think this is a good number of creatures. Maybe I don't need the Gold Vein pick. I do like Treasure, and it does help me get towards casting the more expensive spells, but I mean, maybe Bolt Wave isn't that exciting because it's just 3 damage to my opponent.
Oh, yes. I prefer interaction with the board over just doing damage to your opponent.
Because this can't hit creatures.
Yeah.
And if this was a creature, I could deal 3 damage multiple times. So we'll cut Bolt Wave, and then we'll say that that's the deck.
So now that the deck construction is done, there's 2 important things to know. The first, every single card that we didn't use right now is going to go into our sideboard. And at a pre-release event, you have something called continuous deck construction. So what that means is between every game and between every match, you can swap out the cards from your deck for something else. So it turns out if our Rite of the Dragon Caller turns out to be a little too greedy, we can swap it for another creature or another spell. If it turns out we're not really having fun playing red-green and we want to experiment with white, if you've got the time between rounds, go ahead, play around and experiment. And of course, it's a great time to talk to your friends or the judges to be like, what do you think? How does my deck look? Anything you'd change, anything you'd play?
I also have in this stack, for example, this copy of Broken Wings that destroys an artifact, enchantment, or creature. And if you are noticing, boy, everyone seems to have that big scary angel that gains life and draws cards or whatever, or there's people with, Rite of the Dragon color and enchantment, or just you're encountering a lot of targets for that, you can go, you know what? I think this might be better for me than this Goblin Surprise, and I'll just put that in the deck. Because normally you can always swap that out between games in a best of 3, but at the pre-release you can just say, no, you know what, this is actually always in my deck now going forward, and you can just do that. So now that we have our 23 spells, the last thing to do is to add lands. There should be a land station wherever you are, just a big pile of basic lands that you can grab. You're looking for 17 lands, as I mentioned, so sometimes it can be tricky to figure out exactly what your ratio is. In this case, I would probably just go with 8 and 8 for 16 lands, and then this Evolving Wilds makes 17, and that's probably good enough. But you can take a look and see, I really want to make sure that I get my Llanowar Elves early. Like, if I didn't have this Evolving Wilds, I'd be going 9 forests, 8 mountains, edging slightly more towards forests because I want to try and get the Llanowar Elves as early as possible. But otherwise, the breakdown is pretty even for how early we want certain colors, and so 8 and 8 and an Evolving Wilds is probably just fine.
2 tips. The first, you can just count how many pips you have, and that's going to show you how much green you need and how much red you need. And the second thing, as Graham was mentioning, was what turn do you need the mana is more important. If all of your green is in your early game and all of your red is in your finishers, you can err more towards the green than the red, or vice versa.
Yeah, you want Llanowar Elves early, you want Overrun late. So I do want green early. I don't need to worry about getting triple green that early, but I do want to cast Overrun, because it's just fun.
With Krenko? Oh my god.
So many goblins all getting +3/+3 and trample. Oh, that's good stuff. So that was putting together a sealed pool at your Magic Foundations pre-release. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully you enjoy the pre-release. I have been Graham, joined by Serge. Thanks for watching.